Hi, everyone. Welcome to the latest episode of PeaceX, Solving for X. And my guest today is Karma Ekmekji. She is a mediation advisor with UN Women. She's also a senior policy fellow at the Isam Faraz Institute for Public Policy and International Affairs at the American University of Beirut, and the lead advisor on their Women, Peace, and Security Initiative. But Karma is better known for being the founder of Diplowomen. She is a social media diplomatic influencer, if you could imagine. And I discovered her on Instagram and instantly fell in love with her in terms of how she was using technology and social media to promote peace and security in the world. And I had her as part of our Peace One Day tech panel, and we really hit it off. Welcome, Karma. Good
Thank
to
you for
see.
having me. Thank you for having me, Margarita. It's always a pleasure to speak with you.
So tell me, where in the world are you and what are you doing right now?
All right, so it's 7:11 p.m. where I am. I'm in Beirut, Lebanon, so all the way across the world. And I am running away from putting my kids to sleep. So I have a great excuse and I'm talking to you.
Sick. When we talked on the piece one day, we had a great time. We had Kate Sullivan from Microsoft. We had Alina Noor. We had Stefan
Stefan.
Dugan
Mhm.
from the Cyber Peace Initiative. Trying
The
to
Cyber
remember.
Peace Institute in Geneva.
Geneva, yeah. And one of the things that you and I really lit up around was um, we were talking about how peace needed to be profitable. And you were really passionate about that. And of course, Peace Innovation Lab, Peace Innovation Institute, that's something we've been promoting. Peace tech, we need to make, that we need to make it an investable sector. But
Mhm.
you were coming at it from a very strong point of view, from a diplomatic point of view, but also from your part of the world.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So we're always the recipients of war in in my part of the world, right? We live in the Middle East. According to the Global Peace Index of 2019, we've been the least peaceful region in the world. And I've been trying to work at the intersection of peace building and tech for a while now to see how we can use the tools available to us, the tech tools that are available, uh, uh, to use them for our work, for peace building, for mediation, negotiation, conflict resolution, and so on. And I realized that we haven't been exploiting the technology enough, and that we, have a long way to go to see how these tools, whether they're artificial intelligence or machine learning and the big data and delving into all of that, how can we use these tools to help us? Now, most of us don't come from the tech world, right? Most of us, we've been working in whether it's conflict zones or areas in tension and on the ground, and most of us don't have that kind of tech background. So it's very important that people from my world are communicating with people from your world, and this communication is starting to grow so that we can see how we can work together, to help bring peace, to the world. And here, there's a whole spectrum, and we'll go back to monetizing peace, and that's, I'm very passionate about that subject, and I think you and I are going to do great things there. But peace is on a spectrum, right? So for me, where I'm sitting, for me, peace is like ending conflict, ending wars, ending, transboundary tension, or like different civil strifes or civil wars that are happening in my region. For others, peace may be inner peace, right? Finding your inner peace, finding a balance between your emotions and your physical and mental and spiritual states. For others, peace is probably, on a community level, or on the street level, or bullying in schools, or domestic violence, and so on and so forth. So when we say peace, we really mean peace in all the concentric circles, right? You start from the individual, you grow into the family, the community, your country, and then your region, and then the world. So how can we bring all of this together and all the tech tools available to, promote peace?
Absolutely. Certainly, in I've been spending almost the last 2 months in Santa Fe in this really interesting opportunity to sort of have sort of like a quasi sabbatical retreat, go be a hermit in the desert and just sort of think. Well, I do all my
Need
Zoom,
that. Oh my God, do I need that?
but it was nice to have the change in environment. And then Mark Nelson, who who founded the Peace Innovation Lab, joined me, and we've been having just these long discussions as we go in these long walks in the desert, um, about the essence of what we're doing. We've been talking about peace, and then we realized, well, maybe what we're really talking about is connectedness, and how um, if you think about, and Mark's been doing a lot of deep thinking about, what does peace finance look like, and
Mhm.
and kind of reimagining banking and money and all of this, and saying maybe the real asset isn't real estate. When we think about when we invest in stuff,
Right.
we invest in land and property and buildings and infrastructure and stuff. But what COVID has taught us is that a high-rise office building is worthless if there are no people in it. And so it
And if the
turns
windows can't open, and if the
right,
windows
we're not saying
can't
open,
open.
it's like even worse. But because it turns out all that stuff is in the service of people interacting with each other and being connected to each other, having some kind of
Mhm.
relationship with each other. And so if we start flipping the script and say, no, everything we do is to facilitate and to promote and to strengthen the connection and relationship that we have with other people. Because when
Absolutely.
we have these relationships with other people, then we can create value. Because an empty building is just a pile of bricks, has no value to anyone if nobody's in it, right?
Absolutely.
This
Mhm.
infrastructure has no value if no one is interacting. If people don't show up, nothing happens. And so our notion of what's valuable in the world isn't stuff, it's people. And it's that you, me, and the relationship, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
You and I exist individually, and then there's this relationship that has this thing. It's almost like marriages, right? You have you have the two partners, and then you have the
Right.
the relationship, and all three need to be healthy,
Mhm.
right? And if
Absolutely.
I want to have a strong relationship with you, it's in my self-interest to make sure that you are well taken care of, that you are provided for, that you are thriving, and so on, because we are both invested in the relationship.
Right.
If the relationship is compromised or damaged because you're not doing well or I'm not doing well, then we need to change that. So when we think about peace tag, what are the opportunities that we can create to strengthen relationships, either with ourselves in terms of our inner peace? There's all sorts of products and services and experiences that can help us become more at peace with
Mhm.
ourselves and then with others. And what does that look like? And so it still may be a restaurant, right? But the restaurant is an affordance for people to come together and celebrate,
Mhm.
or and appreciate each other, or have a conversation with each other. I mean, Starbucks was positioned as certainly in the United States, as people's third place outside of home and work. You needed to have a third place to go to.
Mhm. Mhm.
So, but what is the purpose of that third place? It's to be in relationship with other people,
Right.
right? And the way you monetize it is, well, I need to have an artifact. I mean, if you and I got together, I wouldn't necessarily give you $5, right? It's like, oh, it's so good to see you. Here's $5. But what I would do is I would buy you a cup of coffee,
Right.
right? That gesture. And so that's the moment of monetization. But it's really about, I'm buying you a coffee, and the coffee is a token of how I value the time with you.
Mhm. And of course, here we can venture into this whole space of like cryptocurrency and tokens and how reward peaceful behavior. I mean, it's a really interesting space to do some thinking in because, um, you know, when I say monetize peace, and here, like, I'm going to take peace from where I'm sitting, like I said, and we can talk about it from the different ends of the two ends of the spectrum and everything in between. So much money is spent on militarization. So much money is spent on buying weapons. So much money is spent on the weapons industry. So much money is spent on buying, fake propaganda and disinformation, to cause tension and to, create all this, misinformation that can lead you to genocide and massacres, like we saw happening in with the Rohingyas and whatnot. So how do we show, and sorry, so people are doing that because someone is benefiting from that someone's making money out of all of this, right? There's an equation, and war is proving to be more lucrative than peace, right?
Mhm.
How do we reverse that equation to monetize peace in a way that shows that peace is actually a better business than war?
Well, but so here's the thing though, at least in my neighborhood, unlike your neighborhood, which is, kind of a shady part of the planet
Yeah.
because of all conflict, um, it is like 99% peaceful.
Right.
I don't worry about walking out and that there's going to be some homemade bomb somewhere. I don't worry about being assaulted. I don't worry about these things. So I live in a positive peace world, and all the trade, all the business, all the interactions, the assumption is, or the default is positive peace. We are going
Absolutely.
to treat each other well, that it is going to be fair, that it is going to be respectful. And if anything, in my part of the world, we spend an enormous amount of time thinking about the user experience. How do we design a great user experience? How do we make it
Right.
easy? How do we make it intuitive? And if you think about the emotion behind that, it's like, okay, if I design this, lovely device and make it easy to use and everything else, what do I do emotionally for the person? If something's frustrating to use
Hmm.
and it triggers frustration in me, it changes my affect, then the
Right.
way I show up in the world for people that day, whoa, whoa onto
Not
them.
peaceful. Not peaceful.
Because, the device has triggered these negative emotions in me, and then
Right.
I might take it out on other people, even though
Hmm.
they weren't the cause of it, they're the target of it, right?
Right.
So in some ways, designing a user experience or a customer experience that elevates you, that makes you happy, that you go, oh, wow, that was wonderful.
Right.
That carries forward to other people,
It
right?
projects peaceful behavior. It projects.
Right.
Right.
So there are things, but I don't think that people who design these devices are necessarily thinking, I'm creating positive peace in the world.
No, that's why you need to bring in people who understand this stuff into, the process of any design of any product. And we
Yeah.
go into the inclusivity of the design process. And this is something I think that's interesting for us to talk about. We talk about the inclusivity of peace processes. How can we design a peace process, or how can we design negotiations that include the youth, that include the women, that include marginalized groups, so that the peace that we're creating is a positive and just peace,
Right.
and that could be, you know surely on the level that you're speaking on, it applies, right? You have to have inclusivity in designing whatever product you're designing, so that you can make sure that, you know you're bringing in all the different perspectives into your design process.
And I was reading Rob Chestnut. He was the former chief ethics officer for Airbnb, and he has this book out called Intentional Integrity. And he tells the story of Airbnb, how they had an employee who was disabled. He needed to have a motorized wheelchair,
Hmm.
and so of course in his world, that was the filter through which he judged accessibility to, or everything that he did. Like, can I get into this building with my motorized wheelchair? Can I go to this destination with my
Right.
motorized wheelchair? Because that's what it was. But because they had that employee, they changed the interface on Airbnb, because he said, my problem is that when I travel, I go and look and they tell me it's accessible, and then when I get there, it really
It's
isn't,
not. Mm.
right? And so because they had that one employee in the organization, they changed the filters on the platform. And when they evaluated the host, they said, okay, when you say you're accessible, this is what we mean by being accessible.
Right.
because of that one person in the organization is being part of that product development team, it increased accessibility for millions of people around the world, right?
Right.
And so when we think about certainly in our lab
And
motto, and
it makes Airbnb more profitable.
absolutely,
They've monetized inclusivity.
exactly,
Yeah.
because it's not just a young software engineer who is happens to be in a motorized wheelchair, but it's a grandmother. It might be someone who's temporarily disabled, and so on. And likewise at Microsoft, when they look at their accessibility,
Hmm.
because the CEO of Microsoft has a child who has special needs, and
Hmm.
so guess what? The entire organization. So like, oh, we need to think about inclusion and accessibility. And so in terms of vision, in terms of hearing, in terms of, whatever, however our products are used, because we go, we need to make it work for this child. But by extension, it works for everybody.
Everyone.
So to me, that's the power of having a really diverse and inclusive workforce, because it isn't just about like your degree, oh, we hired you because, you're a software engineer,
Code. Yeah.
because of who you are, right? There's so much value just being who you are and telling us this is what it's like to be me. And they're like, wow, how could we make changes in the product or the
Mhm.
experience so it works for you? Right? These are like you become like the stand-in for millions or billions of people. And
Right.
to me, that's the exciting opportunity in terms of getting people business to think about what they already do every day and how can you make that 10% better or 10% more inclusive or whatever, because that actually has a material impact in the world in terms of
That's
how we
what I'm trying to do is to take that, you know, thinking process from the business world, from the private sector, where the space where you play in, into
right.
the space where I play in, and try
Mhm.
to see how we can, you know, kind of do that extra 10% in, you know, negotiations and diplomacy, in governance, in peace building, in mediation. This is exactly, and this is the intersection where I want to like explore further in 2021 with you.
Aha. Okay. So, I worked at IDEO back in the day. So we could be like the IDEO of peace and diplomacy. We say,
Let's
okay,
do
we're going
that.
to bring, innovation and product design and psychology and user experience.
Absolutely.
That's like, okay, what's the user experience of a diplomatic session?
Well, you know, COVID really slapped us all in the face because, you know, diplomacy is known for the as being the craft of shaking hands, right? And here you are, like you can't shake anyone's hands. Like we're done shaking hands for God knows till when, you know, until this vaccine, you know, proves that it's working and everything. So really we were blown away with COVID, whether it is on diplomatic work, you know, a lot of things we do happen in the corridors, they happen in networking sessions in between, you know, meetings or conferences, and uh, Zoom only works, or online platforms only serve us to a certain extent, but the human interaction, the human connection, you know, that's required for our work is immense. And we've really been like we had a curveball thrown at us. You know, everyone got that curveball. Like you can exponentially
Yeah.
consider what like happened to us. And I think it also, I mean, COVID was only, I think it accelerated what we were eventually going to face. That we live in a more, you know, in a more digital world, in a more cyber, you know, oriented space. And how can we, you know, move our kinetic physical world into the cyber, slowly into the cyber world, you know, and we were, I think this was just expedited by COVID, but it was only a matter of time that we were going to be hit with this.
Yeah. It's interesting because when you look at like platforms like eBay, Airbnb, and so on, you know, um, like Airbnb had to figure out trust.
Mhm.
eBay had to figure out trust because you have buyers and sellers, hosts and guests, and you say, how do you get them, especially with the Airbnb and when I used to give like public talks with real people in the audience, I would ask them, how many of you would allow a perfect stranger into your home tonight? And everyone's
Mhm.
like, And I go, okay, if I offered you $50, would you? And they go like, I got 100, 200. What would it take for you to open up your home to a
Right.
perfect? And they're bringing like, and I go, well, but what if you could solve that, and what would that be worth? Because it's really about this hospitality behavior and its
Yes.
trust.
Mm-hmm.
Airbnb has cracked that code because they figured out how to do this trust at scale. Because what happens is both the host and the guest trust the platform, right?
Mm-hmm.
Platform is going to be the mediating technology that's going to regulate the behavior of the guest and the host. Both, if
Mm-hmm.
you've ever gotten on Airbnb, it's like, okay, so show us your national ID and this and that. And it's like, because they really want to know that you're a real person and then
So how
evaluate.
did they do that? How did they build that trust?
Well, so there's this algorithmic trust in that, who's allowed to be a guest and who's allowed to be a host, right? So there's
Mm-hmm.
this vetting process.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are certainly financial guarantees, because certainly the first level of trust is financial trust.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm the host, am I actually going to get paid?
Right.
Right? If I'm the guest, if something comes up, can I get my money back? So that's one level of trust. Then the next one is around safety. Is the place as represented? I see the photos, and when I get there, because
Mm-hmm.
they talk about this moment of truth, right?
Right. What you see is what you get, or is it?
What you see better be what you get, right? And so on. So they've really thought about that experience and that customer journey, but
Mhm.
both for the host and for the guest. And then they have data, because like, what's the evaluation? How was your visit? Tell us about your experience, and you put it in, and so on and so forth. So they've got lots and lots of data to be able to look at
Mhm.
patterns, to see what's going on, to flag if something's going on. Certainly when the racism issue came up in terms of host bias, they
Mhm.
actually went to work and said, people are saying this. Okay, let's look. Oh, wow. Yes, this is actually happening. Okay, how do we mitigate it? And so they did a lot of host training on this and saying, look, this is anti-bias training. And I go, wow. I go, if they're successful at doing this, this will have more impact
Right.
than legislation, because it's not just in the United States, it's global, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
All their hosts all over the world. It's like, okay, this is what you need to agree to. And if you don't, sorry, you don't get to be a host. You
Right.
know, our house, our rules. We don't, if you're going to be discriminating against people of color, you can't be a host.
Right.
Move it,
But that
right?
also brings us. That also brings up the issue of digital gender discrimination.
Right.
We keep talking about gender discrimination in the workplace, gender discrimination in politics, etc. And now we're talking about gender discrimination in cyberspace. We also have that gender aspect um, that
Yeah.
hosts need to look into.
Right. And certainly for Airbnb hosts, like 40% of their hosts are women.
Hmm.
And so it's been a great platform for women to monetize, this asset of like this home, or spare room, or so on. So it's been a great opportunity for wealth creation for women, you know,
Hmm.
on the platform. But yeah, to me, what's interesting is that because they have this huge corpus of data, they can analyze it, and they can say,
Hmm.
are we seeing particular patterns of bias? Are we seeing patterns of discrimination? If so,
Hmm.
how do we correct it? And so one of the things that they did was, you have the instant booking. They increased the number of hosts that had instant booking. And so like, okay, if the room is available and there's someone who wants to book it, boom, it's just done, right? As
Right.
opposed to having the interaction of the host deciding whether or not they want you, and so
Right.
on.
Right.
So they looked at behavioral interventions to address this. And of course, it's not perfect, but what I find commendable about them is that they have a process of continuously looking at these issues and saying, okay, how do we find a solution, or how do we make it better, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And and so this
It's
continual
iterative process.
process, because the problems change, right? And something that wasn't an issue 5 years ago all of a sudden emerges as an issue, and
Yeah.
you need to be on top of that, be vigilant about that.
Right.
So they figured out how to do trust within that thin slice of hospitality. With eBay, it was trust between buyers and sellers. back before people had digital payments in the late
Mhm.
90s, and people would
Mhm.
send a check in the mail, like, would you actually receive the check? And I'm not going to ship it until I receive payment, and I need to make sure the
Right.
payment is good. And if it's good, then I will actually ship it. Um, and it worked remarkably well because people, you know, behaved in a trustworthy manner because they wanted the transaction to be successful. They wanted to give and get a good experience. And it turns out
Mhm.
that by and large, people do want to have that. Um, so what practices or know-how could we take from, really high performing businesses that create great experiences? What do they think about in terms of the psychology, and how could we put that into another sector would be
Mhm.
really exciting.
Really exciting to look at. Definitely.
So if you could reimagine Zoom for diplomats, what would it be? How would you make it different?
Well, it was, I can't remember who was telling me this, but a few days ago, someone was telling me that there is this new platform. I think it's called Welcome,
Okay.
that is really like transforming the Zoom experience into something out of the world for us. So I still haven't looked into it. I think it's online already, but apparently it's going to it's taking Zoom out on a walk. So I don't know. Let's see. But people are already thinking about this. So I haven't really looked at it yet. But maybe if you you're googling it, aren't you?
I am looking for it. I said welcome, and it gives me okay. Welcome Zoom meeting, sign in, Zoom videos. Welcome to
Does it give
Zoom.
you anything?
No, I mean,
Ah,
is it? Does it have a funky spelling,
that's
or
a
is
good
it?
question. Maybe it's with a K. I don't know. Let me see.
Yeah, let's try.
I'll find out more about it. Let's see.
Nope, nothing yet. Okay, but
No.
if we were to brainstorm and say how, because let's face it, it feels like everybody's using Zoom, right?
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, I live on Zoom.
and certainly for remote distributed teams, this is how we're getting work done. Um, I don't know about you, but remote distributed teams, it's like if I don't see them on Zoom, I have no idea if they're actually working the rest of the time. It's like I hope they are. I don't know that they are. I can't see them,
Well, I
right?
think it got like awarded app of the year or something, no?
Zoom, probably,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, I wish I had bought Zoom stock last year. That's all I can.
Right? I think we all wished we had bought Zoom stocks. On a serious note, I really think that this is an untapped space. Like, we haven't really delved into this peace tech industry enough. And I
Mhm.
think the next 5 to 10 years, this sector, like, who would have thought fintech like a decade ago? Who would have thought agrotech a decade ago? Who'd have thought the transformational change that AI and VR and um, 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 machine learning is going to bring to healthcare?
Yeah,
Right? I'm convinced that this sector is going to flourish.
yeah.
I feel like we need to invest in this. We need to invest money. We need to invest our energy. We need to invest our ideas, our thoughts. We need to invest our time, because it's definitely an industry that's going to grow and it's going to bring positive change. And I want to be part of that.
And I think that if we can embed it in our everyday lives, right? Because it's sort of like the addressable market of writing software for diplomats is probably not going to be very big.
No,
Uh, and by the way, you use all the tools that the rest of us use. It's not like, you use the diplomats version of Zoom that's called, I don't know, Doom. I don't know what it's called.
it's probably called Doom.
Right?
I like that.
It's not like you're doing these obscure, apps, right? You're using the mainstream apps. But
Right.
if the mainstream apps have, it's like, okay, how do we make sure that people are understood? So, I mean, if you think about where the potentials of conflict are in terms of digital communications, it's miscommunication, misinterpretation,
Misinformation,
information. Um, how do you, and also because there's something
defamation campaigns. That's
right.
huge.
So certainly there's stuff that you can do in terms of the negative peace space, right? Okay, no trolling, no bullying, no this, no that, right? So you put the stuff in place. So that deals with the getting it to that
Right.
neutral, right? From negative peace
Mm-hmm.
to peace neutral.
Mm-hmm.
But then
Mm-hmm.
we think about how good can we be to each other?
Right.
Like what is about like using this augmenting technology that creates a better experience than if we were in person, or some elements that we could dial up. Um, is there something by using this platform that we could increase our sense of well-being with each other, or trust, or
Mhm.
intimacy, or understanding each other? Um, I don't know what that looks like yet,
Neither do
but
I, but it's there. Like I see the pieces. We just have to.
yeah, because certainly one company that I love that I talk about all the time is called Textio,
Okay.
and I think of it as a great peace tech company. And Textio was founded by these women who are PhDs in linguistics.
Okay.
Start out by saying, we will, job descriptions are biased, and
Wow.
your job description, and we will tell you how it's biased and who it excludes. Because companies say like, here's, I'm looking for a rock star coder who's going to be a ninja, who's going to really knock it out of the park, blah blah blah. And
And
they
who
say
can
like,
sing opera?
and they're going to say, but when you use that language, male coders respond to that because they want to be the rock star who's going to knock it out of the park. A female coder is going to read that and say, oh, this job isn't for me. Or a person of color is going to say,
Right.
oh, this, they don't think of themselves in those terms. And so they
So
feel
where
like,
is this? Where's this company, and what does it exactly do? I'm very curious because I'm going to tell you a story that happened with a friend of mine.
okay, so what Textio does is they go, okay, give us your job descriptions and we'll give you a score of who this job description resonates with. And so for
Okay.
companies saying, we're just not getting diverse enough applicants, they go,
Mm-mm-mm.
maybe one area that you can focus on is how you write your job description in a way that it attracts the broadest,
It's more inclusive.
more inclusive candidates. Because
Hmm.
it turns out that language can be a barrier. And people
Right.
will go like, oh, that's not me. And so they won't even bother to apply, right?
So this is what happened to my friend, right? She works at this place, and
Mhm.
she wanted to apply to another job. And this other job requested as part of her application, uh, like to tick a box if they could contact her current supervisor as a reference to get feedback on her, right?
Mhm.
Like, can we contact your current employer? Who's your reference? Do you know what I mean? Like, you always have these like boxes, like, are you comfortable? Like, could we contact your previous employer?
Right.
Yes or no, right? So here she was faced with a situation where she had to tick either a yes box or a no box, otherwise the thing won't. She can't like submit, right? Because that's an empty um, question
Right.
space.
Right. And it's a
And
required question. So it's
right,
like,
exactly. It's a required question. So she called me and she said, if I tick yes, this guy harassed me. My current boss, whom I'm trying to leave, but I can't leave because I need the income because I have to pay for I
right.
have to like, my family depends on it, right? So if I click yes and for any reason they call him and I don't get the job, I'm screwed.
Mhm.
And if I click no, then they're going to think this candidate is shady. Like, why doesn't she want us to? And it's a woman, right? Obviously. Why doesn't she want us to? Is she hiding something? So the
Right.
question is inherently like drafted in a
It's a
poor
loaded question.
right. So I'm telling you the story because what you just this company really like it's not only the TORs, it's also how to design application forms, right?
Right. 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 Exactly. And
Mm-hmm.
um, so having, in terms of the diverse team that's designing the application form, or, you know, um, Miraline at Microsoft, she has this whole harms modeling taxonomy, which I love, I love, I love. And what is like physical injury, psychological injury, emotional injury, data dignity, right to privacy, da da da.
Oh,
And
sorry,
so
what's data dignity?
data dignity has to be like the right to be
Excuse my
forgotten.
ignorance. Okay.
There's a whole category, right,
Right.
around data. So it's not just like data privacy, but data dignity. Like, do you have the right to be forgotten? If this data got was breached in some way? Would it cause harm, humiliation, shame to the
How
person?
interesting.
You know,
Yeah.
they're great questions to ask because then you say, oh, do I actually need to collect all this data, right? Because collecting all this data creates a liability. It
Hmm.
creates a potential for harm downstream if it gets hacked, if it gets
Right.
stolen, like do do we want to leave that possibility open? And, is the benefit worth that cost, right?
Right.
And so it's great to have these questions because you sit and ponder and you go like, oh wow, yeah, right. Oh, I hadn't thought about that.
Right.
But likewise with this application, if you're designing an application, you'd say, okay, if someone is vulnerable, are these questions exposing their vulnerability,
Right.
or are automatically eliminating people because they don't want to present as vulnerable,
Hmm.
right? For
Right.
whatever reason, they may not be able to go public on it. They may not
Right.
want to talk about it, right? They
Right.
don't want to be targeted as well.
It's really
And
interesting.
go like, oh my God, I never really thought about it. It was just a resume. It's just a
Right.
job up.
Exactly.
Yeah. But that could make it's a tiny difference, but it's a difference that matters.
It's, I mean, I know from my friend, she was really scarred because, and she was really stressed. And she was like, I can't put yes and I can't put no. So
Mhm.
I'm just going to drop this. I'm not going to apply.
Right. Right.
And, and she didn't have to be that extreme. She could have just put yes, and they probably would have never contacted her former boss anyway. But the fact that it's the principle, right? The way the question was asked was inaccurate.
Right. And certainly in the United States, I don't know how it is in Lebanon, but if you
Oh, this was
call,
a multinational.
okay, so if you go for in the United States, if you call like the former employer, all they'll tell you is sort of like name, rank, and serial number. Like, yes, Margaret worked here from this period to that period, and yes, she held this position. Full stop.
Okay,
Because
just to make sure that she's not lying on her resume, but like they wouldn't ask her about her credentials or anything.
for performance or anything like that, because nobody wants to get into liability issues
Mm.
or defamation or anything like that. So they're like, yep, the person worked here from then to that, and that's it.
And
That's
that's
all.
it.
Yeah. So you couldn't, so in terms of a reference, it would have to be a personal reference.
Hmm.
Yeah. But that's what LinkedIn is for, you know.
Right? Exactly.
Be sure to be diligent and ask for, testimonial reference and just it's part of your file. It's part of the public record, right?
Right, right. Like I need to be more active on LinkedIn. I just don't have time for all these different social media platforms. But I mean,
But you use LinkedIn for diplomacy.
sorry.
How would you use LinkedIn for
Oh, we
diplomacy?
should. I mean, it's a great idea, but like the thing is that so a lot of like I said in the beginning, a lot of the people in this space are not tech savvy, right? They're not comfortable. They're not technosexual. They're not comfortable with the technologies around them.
Yeah.
And so I think COVID really pushed us over the cliff to really try harder and be more digitally and so digitally present. I don't want to say social media present because the digital world is not only social media, right? We keep confusing that. We keep limiting ourselves to the notion that tech and tech tools and digital space and cyber issues are social media. They're not. Social media is like 1% of everything else that's out there.
Mhm.
So I think there needs to be like sort of a dumbed down version thing for me to better understand how I can use coding and AI and all these tools in our
Well,
space.
there's this whole no code movement.
Really?
Yeah, because there's these great tools like Bubble.io and others where you can build MVPs, minimum viable products,
Okay.
um, using not having any coding skills at all.
So what do you use?
Well, you use these platforms and they kind of have this logic and this if then and so on, and then you build it out, or you can mock them up. There are lots of
How
prototyping platforms.
cool.
You say, okay, this is the screen. I want to put a button here. You drag it over there, and this is what it does. And when I click the button, it does this. And so you don't have to know how to code anymore to
Wow.
building
All the
something.
money I'm investing into my kids is going to be useless.
But the tools have changed, have advanced so much.
Right.
over the years, based, when I remember when I was coding 25 years ago and doing like a lot of SQL and doing it by hand, or CSS, back in the day when you were designing websites and you need to know how to code with CSS, it's cascading style sheets and all that. Nobody does that anymore. So yeah, we could do, okay, here we go. Let's brainstorm. We could do a diplomat no code venture studio to come up with diplomatic apps.
I like that.
Or apps that meet diplomats' needs. But I bet it's going to be, our diplomat is going to be like our coder in the motorized wheelchair. We'll find out that their needs turned out to represent
the
beyond
needs of so many. Absolutely. And I think that having a focus group or a group of people to brainstorm with, like a diplomat, a mediator, a negotiator, like a special envoy, an international civil servant, like all of these people coming together, say, what do we really need? Like, what are some of the issues that I'm facing, and how can, I need this kind of tool. I wish someone can make it for me. And then we can think of how to do that.
It's a deal.
It's a deal. 2021, I'm telling you.
Yeah, make this happen.
We're going to make this happen.
But
it's always so inspiring talking to you, because you just radiate all this positivity and like energy. I love it, Margarita. I love it.
We just need funding. You find me funding. It's sort of like,
let's do this.
Funding lever. So like Atlas, I can move the world.
No, I think we have something going. I think there's like I said, when I first spoke to you, when we first spoke, we said like, we're still in the very early stages of thinking about this, right? And we need to have more of these brainstorming sessions. Now we're doing it publicly on you for a podcast, but like maybe this can generate more ideas, and people who are listening to us would like just shoot us emails or messages or comments and say like, you know what, you talked a lot, you two ladies, but at some point, I think what you said made sense. And even though I didn't quite get it, but here's an idea. And those are the sort of ideas we need,